Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon for some of you. My name is Manny Tejeda, one of the program directors here at CFES Brilliant Pathways. I'm excited to be joined with our partners from TransPerfect, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves in a second. But this is a career hour that we're doing, and we're going to be chatting today about localization and translations as a job, and they'll tell you a little bit more about what that all means and within the context of TransPerfect. And then we'll jump into some questions. I did warn them that I might have some questions popping in popcorn style. So please use the chat function as you come in and ask questions away, and we'll get to those as we can, okay? So now I'm gonna turn it over to Sara, who's gonna do introductions, and then the rest of the team will introduce themselves.
All right, hi everybody. I'm first going to attempt to share my screen. Let's see if I can do that quickly. Here we are. So hi, my name is Sara Buzadzhi. I work for TransPerfect, a translation agency and general language services provider. I'm a quality manager. I work from Russian and Ukrainian into English. With me here also is Marta. She works as a training specialist from English into Spanish, and Mike, a translator from German into English. Mike, do you also do Dutch or just German?
Just German.
Just German. Okay. So we'll try to give you an overview of the key parts of our jobs, sort of our day-to-day, talk about a bit about some different subject areas of translation, the workflow of a translation through our departments, some other side projects and initiatives that we might do, and then a bit about career background and education. Okay, so I said that I was a quality manager. It's a bit of a vague term. It's different for different industries, but for us, it means that we're one of the last steps looking at a job, reviewing it before it goes back to the client. So that's the editing and revision of translated documents. And we also do translation. Some percentage of my day is translation. It might be smaller jobs or VIP jobs, highly confidential jobs. And another part of my job is working with translators to improve quality in general. So translation, it's going to look different depending on subject area. So our department, we all work in the life sciences department. And what that means, kind of document types that we see, a lot of patient medical reports, so blood tests or reports from a hospital stay, doctors, exams. We also see articles from scientific journals, so researchers or doctors writing about new discoveries, new approaches. And then a large part of our day is, or at least for me, is clinical trial documents. So you've probably heard a lot about clinical trials in the last year or so with COVID. So it's testing out new drugs or new vaccines in this case, to make sure that they're safe and effective on a large group of volunteers. It was weird, Marta and I were talking that I know that we were involved in one of the big COVID vaccines. I'm not sure if there's any confidentiality rules about saying which one, so I'll just say one of the major ones we did work for, so that was cool. Right? Oh yeah, and then so you might be wondering why Russian and Ukrainian for clinical trials, so that those trials happen all over the world. So, a lot of my day I'm looking at documents from research that happens in, a medical center in Ukraine, and all these things from all over the world have to get translated into English. So the evidence is all, centralized in one language. Okay, so mentioned life sciences, other fields that we work in. We got some, I don't know if you can see that, but, technology, technical documentation. We get marketing material. There's Disneyland in Spanish here. Products, brand translation. And so, the approach for these different fields is going to be different. For us, for life sciences, the most important thing is accuracy. We want to make sure that we stick as close to the original as possible. Information that a doctor wrote down in a report, we're not so worried that it sounds nice or it flows nicely. We want to make sure we get, exactly the data that he has into the translation, because God forbid, it negatively impacted a patient's treatment or something. If you mess up the dosage, 500 versus 50 milligrams, that's a big deal. So that's what we're really keyed in on for life sciences. But obviously it's going to be different if we're talking about marketing. There, the focus is more going to be, message, cultural connection, style, creativity. And so we have, and it's not just us, like the translation field in general, finance and business and legal, something like business, like a corporate report. Accuracy is also important there, obviously, but you got to think about making it polished and professional. The style is nice. So if you're working in that field, that's something you have to take into account as a translator or reviewer. So just a little bit of here, let me see if I can make this bigger. No, okay. So this is just the workflow of a job through our department. So the project managers in our company and most companies are organizing the process of the job through our department. And for each job or each batch of jobs, they'll get a request from the sales department, and then they will find a translator. And this translator could be an internal staff member, like Mike, or it could be an external freelancer. And we do a lot of work with a fair amount of work with freelance translators. One reason for this is, we might only a couple of times a year need a specific specialist or a specific language pair. Maybe like twice a year, you need someone who translates from Urdu and is a financial analyst, but not enough to, it's not high enough demand for that to keep them on staff year round, for example. So that's a translation step. And then at the quality management step, everything's going to go through 1 or 2 additional reviews. And that's where I or other quality managers are reviewing the document. We're sending any questions to the translator, something is missing, something's not clear. And then everything goes back over to project managers, and they will usually do an additional quality control check. We call it the FE step, the final I. And we're actually going to send, I don't know if we sent to Manny already, or we will after the presentation, just a practice final I test to just sort of see what that looks like for you all.
Sara, can I chime in with a question here?
Yeah.
Just that. Can you share maybe what's the average time span of when something hits workflow 1 to all the way to 3? I'm sure it depends on how much you're translating, but on average, how much time are we talking about?
Yeah, I think from when I get a request for a job and when it passes from the translator to me, it depends, probably somewhere between 1 and 3 days. It's different for larger jobs. And then there's like smaller urgent ones. We do some, one document type I forgot to mention was safety reports. So it'll be like a customer writing an email saying, hey, I took this drug and I got a weird rash. So the safety department of a drug company wants to know about that right away. So that might come in, same day. They want a quick turnaround. That sound about right, you guys? Like 1 to 3 days?
Yeah, and then we have the other extreme where a job could take like 3 months.
Yeah,
especially for all of these questionnaires that clinical trial patients use to measure how well they're doing with a drug or a vaccine. Those go under a really complex process of translation and review and back and forth, and also testing with patients to see if they understand the language. And if they're going to use that in an electronic format, then we have the testing for the electronic format, the final layout. So those can take months to complete from start to finish. So it really depends on the type of document and obviously how fast the client wants it.
Yeah, how much they're willing to put forth effort and payment. Yes. Okay, cool. So that's Joan's setup. And then in terms of what we're working on, say about at this point, maybe 50% of my work is just Word documents or PDF. It's different for different language pairs or different fields. Some people marketing, they've got all kinds of different tech formats that they're working with formatting. But so about 50% Word documents, and then 50% different technology platforms, which Marta's going to talk a little bit more about. But the basic process of review is just, same kind of thing that you do if you're proofreading a paper. I'm checking for accuracy, grammar, nothing's missing. Punctuation, yada, yada, yada. And then I am looking a little bit at style and tone. Like I said, that wasn't so important for life sciences, but obviously it has to be within the general boundaries or framework of that style. I was trying to think of a good example. I know I see ones that stand out, but like, an overly conversational, overly casual term inside of a medical report, like calling somebody, I don't know, like buddy instead of friend, that kind of thing. So it has to be within the boundaries. Like it's not the focus, but it is important. And then reviewing to make sure that the job matches with the reference materials. So client instructions for a particular job, this is the title we want to use. And then also we might have style guides and references for that client in general, like how they want everything to be, lists of terms they always want translated one way. And then our internal style guides and reference materials also. So yeah, I won't go too much into this. Marta's going to talk a little bit about CAT tools later, but this is what it looks like. This is what about half of my jobs look like when I start them. So I will just say about the translation technology, that it's definitely where the industry is going, and it's really improved and changed a lot, in the last decade. I'm sure it's going to look totally different or totally more advanced in 10 more years. I was thinking when I started freelance translating 2005, it just wasn't really a thing. I did everything on Word documents or, PDF files, and I may have been vaguely aware of some technology, but it was not at all used. And now it's pretty much taking over. Right, so I mentioned the main day-to-day review of documents is a lot of what we spend time on, and then working with translators to improve quality. That's, on a specific job, we're working on questions together, trying to resolve issues, and then keeping an eye on things more generally. If we see that somebody is struggling with a particular part of the job or having the same kind of issues over a period of time, we might suggest trainings, like, here's a refresher training on this translation tool, because I see you're having trouble with the spell check or whatever, to try to improve quality in general. Other things that people get involved in are creating and maintaining glossaries, lists of terms for specific clients or for specific jobs, databases and technology for that too. I get involved in technology testing. So I did some of that last year. That was pretty fun. We have internal developers creating new types of programs, and quality managers and internal quality managers and translators can sort of test that out, send feedback, try and improve things. And then there's, trainings for staff, trainings for freelancers, working on reference materials. So that's the cool thing about this job in this company, is that they let you sort of pick the direction of interest and focus on that. So, okay, so we talked about translation. There's a lot of other jobs in the language field that are possible. There's interpreting, translation related, language teaching and training. And then for people speaking 2 or more languages, there's all kinds of international jobs like global social media, working in multilingual customer support, project or vendor management, international PR, you name it. Game testing is a fun one. And so I've had a bunch of different jobs in this field. If anybody wants to contact me later, please do so. So I've worked in, what have I done? Copy editing in translated materials for a news agency. I've done teaching English as a second language, I worked as a bilingual staff member for mostly bilingual staff member for a nonprofit in Moscow for a while. And I worked as a freelance translator for a number of years before I came to TransPerfect. So I'll just mention, I was not lucky enough to grow up bilingual. I learned Russian when I was in university. And so if you are coming from bilingual family, grow up speaking one or more or two or more languages, that's already a big leg up. You've already gotten yourself advanced into the field. It's not the only thing that you need to be a good translator, but it's definitely a big advantage. If you've ever done any, just unofficial interpreting for family and friends, that's already, the kind of work experience that people try to get internships before, or try to get internships for, or work experience doing. Okay, so a bit about education. Among the American or US-based professionals that I know in the field, the undergraduate, the college degree is mostly general language studies, so majoring in the language. I majored in Russian and English, and ended up getting a master's degree in Russian, which was of questionable value, but that's what I did. And in the US, there are graduate degrees. There's more graduate degrees and professional courses that are focused on translation as a specialty. And there are undergraduate courses that are focused on translation as a specialty, but generally it's not really widespread for college degrees to be like, come out of college with a BA in translation studies. That is more common internationally, in Europe especially. There's number of universities and degree courses in translation. But like I said, there are graduate programs that you can pursue if you want to get more specialized in that. And then I was talking to our vendor management team, the recruiting team at TransPerfect, to confirm my understanding of how it works in the US. And they said, yes, language degrees, also people coming from a bilingual background, or people with formal training in education is another area where candidates come from. And then just a couple useful links about education here. If you're interested in exchange programs as a high school student, here under the Bureau of Education and Cultural Affairs exchange program, there's a link to the government website about high school exchange programs. Also, there's the possibility of exchange programs when you're studying in college. And excuse me, I put a link down here. The American Translators Association has a pretty good page. It's got resources it's more geared towards people who are interested in working as freelance translators, but good if you're interested in translation in general. They've got some videos and resources about like useful directions to choose, useful educational paths to choose, and sort of what to expect as a freelance translator. Okay, I think that's about it from me. And then I would like to pass things over to Marta. Since we're talking about education, maybe you want to tell a little bit about like how you got into translation in general.
Yes, thank you, Sara. Thank you, Sara. Yes, hi everyone. I'm Marta Manzanares. I think I was always interested in languages in general since I was young, but I started really getting interested in translation in my last 2 years of high school. I grew up in Spain, so I did all my education there. So you have to choose, the last 2 years of high school, you have to choose a specialization, and you can, choose science and like chemistry and physics. And I went all the other opposite way, the opposite end. And I decided to study humanities. So basically Latin and ancient Greek. And that's where we were doing, if we were not studying declinations and verb conjugations, we were translating. And it was so fun. It was just like a puzzle. Translation is a puzzle. You have to solve a mystery. So I really liked it. And so I decided to get my bachelor's degree in translation and interpretation. That is a very common degree that you can find in all around Europe. You have to understand that we have the European Union, we have to translate all the official documents and interpret all the official parliament sessions and things like that into all the official languages, which is like 20 plus languages. So translation in Europe is, at least in the education level, is very ingrained. So my first foreign language was English. So my working languages are English and Spanish, but I only translate into Spanish. That's how it's supposed to be. You have to translate into your native language, to your mother tongue. And I also studied German and Romanian as secondary languages, although that was it. I didn't work with those languages. And so when I finished my degree, I started working, I moved to the US, I started working at TransPerfect. So this is actually my first job, probably not my first role, but my first company. And I started as a quality manager, reviewing translations from English into Spanish. And then I started specializing in life sciences, so all of the documents that Sara was mentioning before. So that's when I decided to get my master's degree in medical translation, which was also at a Spanish university online. And then I started moving to a more like training related role, where I train internals and external linguists on different types of jobs, mostly life sciences related. So all the patient-facing documents, specialty-facing documents. And I also train on the technology tools that we use for translation. So that's what I wanted to talk about a little bit, so that we use a number of different tools to help us translate, so to make our lives easier. So one of the tools that we use as the main tool, I would say, for translators is something that we call CAT tool. So let me try and share my screen. Okay. You see my screen? Yes. Okay. So CAT tools, CAT stands for Computer Assisted Translation. So like as the name says, is still human translation. So, but it's assisted by a computer. So we get the help of the computer to translate. This is not machine translation or Google Translate or any of that. That's another subject for another day. We do use machine translation, but that always needs to be reviewed afterwards. But this tool is just help us do the translation just easier, more efficiently, and more consistently. So what these tools do is extract the text from our source file and put it in a format that is easy to work into. So this is, I'm going to demo something here. Okay, so Sara, I stole 2 of your slides for this demo. These first 2 slides over here. And you can see we have a lot of elements here that are not really translatable. We cannot translate colors or format or images or the size of the text. And same here, we have different colors in the text, and we don't have all these images and overlapping, whatever this is, boxes. So all of these we don't need to translate the text. So this tool extracts the text that is translatable. And it looks like this. So we have the English text here. This is the source text. In this case, it's English. And then on the right side, we have the target language. In this case, let's use my native language, Spanish. So this definitely is an easier format to work into, I would say. But this is not the only thing that this tool does. We can use what we call translation memories, or TMs. These are databases that contain translations that we have done in the past. So we can run the document against the TM, the translation memory, and we can get some matches. So here you see different colors. We have 100% matches. This means that this exact word we have translated in the past, and we already have a translation for that. So instead of having to type it in or do research on the term, we can just take it from the translation memory. So we save time. And then we have some fuzzy matches. And this means that we have translated something similar, but we can still use some of the translation that we did in the past to save time as well. It also helps us with keeping consistency with terminology and how we translate certain phrases. And that, of course, makes our lives easier and also makes our clients happy, because they definitely want us to use the same language for all the documents. The CAT tools also allow us to connect glossaries. So glossaries are a list of terms, of preferred terms that the client wants to use. For example, we have terms like couch and sofa, but you might have a preference to use one or the other. So this is something that we would capture in a glossary, and then we will make sure that we use that term that the client wants. Or if it's, it could be a client preference, or it could be a term that is mostly used for a specific industry. So like Sara was saying earlier, like friend and buddy, or patient versus subject, that, you know, could have, could be used differently in different contexts and different types of documents. And then we also have, these tools offer these quality control checks. Things like it will flag if you have a number in the source and you don't have that number in the target, or a different number, or if you have a period at the end and you don't have a period at the end in the translation. So all of these discrepancies are flagged. If you didn't follow the glossary, if you didn't use the term that the client wanted, it will also flag it. So these are flags. Of course, it's not going to change the translation. This still is, the computer is still assisting you. So you still have to go through those flags and see if any of those errors are actual errors, and then correct them. So I think those are really cool features. I think the coolest one is that once we have completed the translation, we can pour the text back into the original layout. So remember all of these images and all of these colors and bullet points. So once we convert the file, we have our translation with the same format. And so I don't have to spend time adjusting the format manually or putting the color in the correct words. All of this has been done by the CAT tool. So I think this is really cool. Yeah, so this is a basic overview of CAT tools. We have other software that we use for different areas of translation, for terminology management, for, you know, to capture all of these preferred terminology. But this is the main tool that we use. So I think that's it. I'm going to give the floor to Mike, who's maybe you can also talk about your background and your work as a translator.
Sure, thanks.
Let me
see. Okay, good. Yeah, I think the path that I took to translation was very similar to Sara's. I didn't grow up bilingual. The first language that I studied was French in middle school. And then I got more interested in German and ended up studying that at college and went on to get a master's in German literature of questionable value, I guess. But then through that, I did some teaching. I taught English to German students, which I really liked, and I taught German to Americans. And I think that's something that it's a career path that I would like to maybe pursue going forward a bit, because it's very like rewarding. But I did some freelance translation and proofreading for a while, and then I decided that I wanted to do something a little more dependable and reliable. So I got a job at TransPerfect, and I would say the main thing that's changed over the time I've been here, excuse me, is, as Marta was saying, the translation tools have become such a key part of what we're doing. And basically, I mean, she covered a lot of it, but before I would, take a PDF file or something and translate it myself from scratch. And now really a big part of the job is sort of drawing from the machine translation and the translation memory and kind of trying to piece together like a cohesive translation that doesn't seem like it's from all these different sources. So it's kind of
sorry, let me just ask real quick. When you were a freelance translator, were you doing any of the machine tools, or was that just when you started at TransPerfect?
No, well, it was just when I started, but I'll say that, I mean, they've been around for a while. Like we used to use SDLX and Trados, I think they were called. So, but they've definitely improved. I mean, they've really improved. And they're just like, they're a part of basically every job I do. But it's kind of, even though they're helpful, they've kind of added a new skill that you need, which is like sort of a smoothing out of the translation, like editing while you're translating. And yeah, just to elaborate too on something that Sara said, like, I mean, I mainly do clinical trials work, but that covers like such a huge range of things, like, it's like letters to ethics committees, it's adverse event reports, side effects, it's contracts with the physicians who are going to conduct the study, it's informed consent forms, it's all these different fields and terminology, and it's, in Austria they say one thing, and in Switzerland they say something else. So it's like, even though it's it seems like a very narrow area, it's like you have to know a lot of terminology, and it's kind of like endlessly interesting, but it's also very detail oriented. So it is kind of a vast field, but I think it's kind of fascinating. So yeah, and I think I'll end it there before I get too into detail.
But yeah, that's a really good point, how it's, within whatever field you choose, you're probably going to be really reaching into all other fields. Like you're doing contracts, that's legal, you're doing ethics committee, that's professional language, that kind of thing. All right. So I think that's it from us. Tabby or Manny, should we go into the question portion of the time?
Yeah, it looks like we have a question coming in. I don't know if you see it in the chat there.
I see it. Oh, I see. So if I'm planning on majoring in business, it seems like speaking multiple languages would be a huge advantage given how global international business has become. Should I try and minor in a particular language? I'd say, yeah, definitely. And also that's a good point. Something I forgot to mention about sort of recommendations from the American Translators Association, and just from what we've seen working as freelance translators. If on the other hand, you're interested in a particular language and you think, should I minor another specialization? Yeah, that'd be great. So if you want to be a translator, should I minor in business or technology? That would give you a leg up. And then sure, I think it'd be great to focus on a particular language as you're studying. And maybe, I don't know if you guys have any thoughts about that, but if you...
Great
Are they
combination.
asking what the language is? Like, are they asking for a particular language?
Oh, yeah, good point.
So I have a little advice on that one. I'm Tabby. I'm jumping in because I used to work as a linguist from German to English. But I think looking at what your other interests are within business will help you decide what language might make sense. So for instance, if you're really interested in like the automotive industry, German is going to be really useful. Japanese is going to be really useful. If you're really interested in technology-based businesses, you're probably looking at Japanese or at Chinese or at Spanish. So I would say take a look at like what parts of business interest you, and then start digging into, okay, well, where are major companies located that work on that type of business? And that can help kind of guide what languages make the most sense.
That's a good point, yeah.
I chime in with a question, and Martha, you're out of the three, you're the only one who English was not your first language in the sense of you didn't have to learn it differently. But I'm thinking about students who might speak multiple language, but they might not necessarily think about the leg up that they have in terms of additional value that they bring to any organization. How would you go about? I mean, for you, you mentioned anything in Europe, you had to translate, right? Because you speak like 20 different languages. So it's part of kind of the fabric, right? But maybe in the US, even though we're not translating as much, we know that there are a number of languages that are spoken, probably not like for legal purposes, but like could be translating for your parents or for someone in your family. How do you talk to them about leveraging those skills?
Into like professionally, you mean? Yeah, like Sara said, this is already a big step forward. If they are interested in translation and interpretation, I would say I taught translation in Hunter College for the continuing education program, and I would see a lot of people that came from bilingual backgrounds, but had a hard time with grammar and spelling. So I would say if you do want to, get into translation and you are bilingual and your other language is a language that you've spoken with within your family, but you haven't really studied formally, maybe start just studying formally to get that other part you haven't gotten. It's the same for me. I studied English, and the English that I studied in Spain didn't really do much for me here. I had to learn, and also you usually get like the British English in Europe. So I got here, I had to learn so much. I also learned a lot of Spanish here, so much. I remember my first year, I couldn't understand Dominicans, really. And I had some students that couldn't understand my accent from Spain. So it's definitely, I mean, that they should use, even if it's not for translation, for any other field, having that is such a useful. It's not, you don't need to translate or interpret. You can, you can communicate, you can understand, like Tabby was saying, you can understand like manual for this car, and if you speak this language, or you also understand a whole culture, which is useful for any profession. Yeah, they already have a great advantage. I was just, my only advice would be, if you're going to get into a more linguistic career, then check how well you are on like grammar or spelling and things like that, to get into that. But I don't know if I answered the question.
Let me just chime in with one more thing. It's sort of the opposite, or not US based, but when I was studying in Russia, I ended up getting a lot of opportunities that I was not super qualified for, but just because I spoke Russian and English, that opened a lot of doors. So yeah, you might get you might get into a interview that you wouldn't have otherwise. So I didn't really have that much background to be working for a nonprofit, but I ended up working for them because I could, communicate with donors. And I was able in that way to get a lot of really good work experience. I was running programs, I was, writing reports that I would not have otherwise had access to as a 24-year-old randomly, popping in. But, so that opened a lot of doors. But, and to Marta's point about, not having formal training in a language, one way to do that is a lot of universities will have things called like heritage speaker classes. So if you just want to polish or you want to get, grammar checks, that's there are, little refresher or training programs for someone who grows up bilingual, maybe if it needs a little bit of more background in grammar. I see this question, do hospitals and cities where people speak many different languages need translators? Yeah, and I've seen it in, recently I saw not only in person, but they will have computer consoles, at least in New York, because we've got, I was there waiting in the hospital and there was, 7 different languages go on. They by phone and in person, Vietnamese, Mandarin, and I forget what the other language I heard was, but yeah, so that's definitely a great need, both in person and remotely.
I will chip in and say that all patients have the right to an interpreter for their language. So hospitals should provide free of charge the services of an interpreter if needed. So even, you were mentioning, Sara, about like, if you have interpreter for your family members, and that's actually something that nobody recommends, especially in a medical setting. Because you don't want to, sometimes you're talking about like very sensitive things and you're talking to your mom or to your, so that's like especially when doctors should encourage to get an interpreter to interpret for that person. So they're needed and they're also are required to have interpreters. They have the right, and they have to provide it free of charge. And there are programs that you can do, and there are also certifications. I'm going to find out that information and send it to you, Sara, so you can share it. But yeah, definitely.
I mean, that in itself seems like a great opportunity to get experience, right? Like, so maybe you want to learn a language that you are becoming familiar with it. Maybe you do volunteer for that, or maybe it's a language you already speak, but you might just need more practice before you get to college to study or what have you. So that's an awesome tip.
That's a really great thing that I hadn't thought about. I remember I was living in a city that had a big Russian population, and I volunteered it was a food distribution program. So not only for that reason, but I was speaking to a lot of people, just sort of, gain confidence speaking Russian in a volunteer setting.
And the free food, I'm sure it didn't hurt.
It didn't hurt. There was a lot of bread, but you know what? I was broke at the time. So.
Well, I want to be mindful of time, and I appreciate you all taking the time to chat with us about your areas of expertise, your background. So if there's one tip you can leave our students with, what would that be? And we'll go around each of you.
Who wants to start? I guess we
I'll
kind of already
start.
said it. Okay, go ahead.
Look at those exchange programs. A lot of them are by scholarship. So the reason I speak German is because I was an exchange student in high school. So I think that's the thing that impacted my career the most.
I guess I would say that too, if you're in terms of gaining expertise in a language, like one, yes, I agree that having another language, if you have the opportunity to study it, definitely go for it. It's always going to be useful on a personal, if not professional level. And then if you have the opportunity to spend any time working or studying in a foreign, in the country of that language, that's the quickest way to gain mastery. You can find yourself a job teaching English, find yourself, an internship that will pay your way, then that would be an ideal way.
I can chime in, Martha and Mike, if you need time.
No, I'll go. I think you should study a language that you like, basically. I think that really helps to learn it if you are into the language. So that'd be my advice.
Yeah, let me just add, because I also studied French in middle school, Mike. I think we have even more similar paths, but I just could not vibe with French. And so once I really got interested in Russian, I was willing to put in the time.
I'd say that even if you you study this major in finance and then a language that is appropriate for that, your interests, you can always do translation at some point. We have a lot of our translators and a lot of our, the translator we work with, and even internal translators that come from other industries. And that brings so many useful, useful insight into, if you understand what the text is saying, because you have experience in that, then it's going to be so much easier for you to translate into that language. So I would say that's a perfect combination for a translator, to be an expert in a field and learn a language, and that you have 80% of what a translator needs. I had to do it the opposite way. I had to, I learned the language first, and then I had to learn about all the medical industry, and still, sometimes it's hard to understand like the most technical things. So it's not something like, oh, if I don't translate now, then I will never ever be able to get into the industry. It's actually sometimes the opposite. Like you can, do that as a side job, or once you get tired of your main job, you can just say, oh, let me just translate. And again, we're not saying everyone can translate, even if you know languages, but if you're interested in that and you also have this expertise in a specific industry, then you have a lot, of field gain to the profession.
I'm gonna jump in and share a tip too. One that I personally use. I watch my Netflix shows in whatever language I'm interested in. So if it's a language so I speak Spanish. If it's not Spanish, I watch it in English first and then rewatch it if I have time. I don't want to give the wrong idea. I don't watch a lot of TV, but when I do, that's what I do.
No, that's great. Yeah, that and listening to radio and from the countries where your language is spoken, listening to music, audiobooks.
For me, it helps a lot to watch the show in the original language and the subtitles in that language, not translated, because then you hear it and you see the text. It might not be exactly the same, but most of the words you're gonna see them also written. And for me, I'm a visual learner, so if I hear it and I make the connection with the word, I learn so much faster. So that's how I learned a lot of the English I know, just by reading the subtitles and hearing the shows by.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Manny. A surprising amount of people are like, yes, I finished my Japanese education by watching anime, after school.
Or that's why I want to study abroad in Japan, right?
Yeah.
I want to immerse myself a little bit more in the culture, given what I've been exposed to. So yeah, that I had done many times, lived in a couple of countries outside of the US. So that really helped me. So again, thank you all for taking the time. Wish we could spend a little bit more time and then dive into some of the cultural benefits of speaking a different language too. That would be awesome too. I love eating, so would love to talk about food and language as a next segment, but more on that. All right, bye now.
Okay, thanks so much.